Hello and welcome to the Esports Awards Origins podcast. My name is Trevor Henry. You may know me as Quickshot, and today I will be the host of the next episode where we have a conversation with some of your favorite esports pros, some of the behind-the-scenes stars who make the cogs turn, some of your favorite content creators, and every once in a while I get to speak to somebody who is so incredibly successful and talented at every single game they have played, they frankly put the rest of us to shame. Today, it will be my pleasure to learn more about Halo, to talk about Apex, and to speak to a multi-game, multi-generation, multi-decade champion in Eric Snip3down, Wrona. Eric, first of all, welcome to the show. I don't think that intro is too over the top. I think that's entirely fair.
Thank you. Yeah, you gassed me up very, very well. I appreciate that a lot. You know, I haven't been competing as much, so it's always nice to hear it as if I'm still walking out on stage, getting a getting a celebratory introduction. So I really, really appreciate that.
Can I tell you what? That sentence, like you're walking on a stage, it's one of the nicest compliments any guest has ever paid me on this show. But Eric, I mentioned it just before we started the show that I'm not hugely familiar with Halo as a game. And I know that over here in Europe, where I'm based, Halo championships, Halo tournaments were not quite as big. So could I ask you to give me just a very brief introduction to who is Snip3down, to maybe some of our PC viewers, to some of our business people who maybe are not aware of who you are?
Yeah, Snip3down originated, I want to say, in 2001 back in Halo 1. And it was just kind of a name that was made because I was always sitting at the very top of as high as I can get on perches and looking down and sniping people out of warthogs on Blood Gulch Capture the Flag. And my friends just kind of forced me into gaming, forced my parents to buy me an Xbox. They kind of showed up and were like, you have to get him one. He's really good. They kind of called me like the natural at first. And then it just developed over the years. First started hearing about MLG, started hearing about these tournaments and the ogres and all these things, and just piqued my interest. Always was a competitor, whether it was, sports or anything along those lines. I got that from my father for sure. And it just kind of evolved from there.
I mean, listen, the track record and history that you have is mind-blowing. When I was doing my research, over 20 majors. For everybody who's watching this, Eric has won tournaments as recently as 2022, 2021, 2019, 2018, 2017, 2016. You get the hint. It goes all the way back to the early 2000s. There are very few professional players across very few titles that have the staying power that you have demonstrated, that can win titles across, win championships across various titles, like every single Halo under your belt, as well as moving to Apex. How does that begin? Like, what was your childhood like? I want to go back to the early days before you started winning things, before you were involved in tournaments. I mean, you even just said, before you even had an Xbox, like what's the first game that you played that started this journey?
I want to say the first real game that started any bit of a competitive journey was GoldenEye 007 on the N64. There's some Smash in there too, but that was a bit different. Those are fighting style games. But yeah, GoldenEye, I mean, that was the game where all of a sudden it was a shooting game. You had one analog stick. You had to use the yellow buttons on the side for directional and aiming. And it was just like, it was really difficult. And I remember I was at my local YMCA and I'm the young kid there. Like, probably shouldn't even be playing games like that at like 7 years old. I'm playing against like high schoolers and I beat everybody, and there was like a tournament ladder type thing, and I got to the finals, got second place, and I remember just
how old are you? Just like plus minus now.
Oh my gosh, I had to have been like 8. Like I had to have been like 8 to 10, like somewhere in that range, because it was so young. And yeah, that was like.
Were you?
Oh yeah. Well, no, I wasn't that. I played Jaws a lot actually. Okay, I was like I was the big guy walking around, wanted to like be seen, I guess. But
I appreciate that.
Such a good time.
I like to check because anybody who played Odd Job, I immediately judge them and hold them accountable. That was an unfair advantage. It was.
I think Odd Job was banned specifically for that reason.
It should have been. It should have been. So listen, you're playing GoldenEye. You're competing local tournaments. You said you're about 8 years old, and in your intro, you mentioned that some of your friends had to convince your parents. So talk me through this next couple of years, right? Like, how does 9, 10, 11-year-old Eric grow? How do your parents view the gaming side of things and then the competition that you add onto it?
Yeah, I think, well, my parents always they like the social aspect because back then people got together to play video games. I had a bunch of local friends around the neighborhood. We'd play, whether it was Halo or like I said, Smash or Madden or Time Splitters 2 on the PlayStation, or
Oh, what a
I
great
was
game.
obsessed with Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Like I just was, it was puzzle games. I was such an avid just gamer, and I think that just helped expand my brain in terms of problem solving in a sense, as well as playing games like that at a young age, because we didn't have the cheat books
Yeah.
back then, and trying to get through the water temples and things like that. And I think it just challenged me to kind of view games differently at a young age. So then when Halo started making its way into the picture as a much more team oriented positional game, I feel like I had an advantage. And my competitive side was already peaked just because I had played sports my whole life growing up. And then when I really started digging into Halo in like the 2001, 2002 areas, I had broken my arm somewhere around that time, and I was not able to continue sports, and so I just like divested all my time into video games because I was just very
Do you know
focused
what?
on all
You
that.
will you would be surprised at how many professional players who have found relatively similar levels of success as you have actually stopped playing competitive traditional sports and moved over. I can tell you League of Legends players, Counter-Strike players, and Rainbow Six players off the top of my head that either have a broken wrist, arm, or foot that then got them into like esports, and then they just took off because you got the competitive drive. Were you also still driven to be a good student? Because you said 2001, so we're talking like early teenage years. You're already starting to compete. Was school still a focus?
So I started competing like at actual events in 2008, but I got interested
Okay.
around 2006 to attend, like to attend in person. I attended locals, like locals in the area. I started attending
Yeah.
those when I was like 13, 14. Really, parents weren't always thrilled about that, but yeah, I mean, hold on, I kind of lost myself on the question
No,
a
you're
little
good. I was
bit.
asking about. So I'm asking about school because, but one of the
Oh,
things that
right.
we'll dive into Halo and we'll dive into Apex in a second or two. But I also just want to get a bit of a sense. You sound like you're very committed. You sound like you're a very dedicated individual. You also sound quite intense. 8-year-old kid attending tournaments, 10, 11-year-old playing at locals. Like that's ahead of the curve. Was it at the cost of school? Was basically the question.
Yeah. So for me, when it came to the schooling stuff, I mean, the locals and stuff in Indiana, like that wasn't as big of a deal because, those were held at, GameWorks studios at the top of, the Indianapolis mall. And so it
Yeah.
was just kind of like an event to go to, could just make something out of it. It didn't last a ton. There weren't as many people there. But when I started really wanting to compete and start traveling, it's like the Ohio's or these MLG events, that's when my parents were a lot more strict, and I had to kind of work towards something more, whether it was more chores around the house or better grades, and just kind of showcasing them that I deserved that, and it had to be earned to get that kind of privilege to go to these things. And I did. I took on as many more responsibilities as I needed to, got my grades up. They loved that, so it was kind of a win-win for both of us.
Listen, I got that feeling immediately. I took a gamble on the question because we want to be a good inspiration here for players, but I can sense it. My parents did the same thing with me. I had to maintain certain grades to be able to still scrim and practice. And when I think about my 16-year-old self and think about what the esports industry grows into, as well as the career that I'd have, if I told my 16-year-old self what was going to happen, I'd say you're a liar. I wouldn't believe me. What did 16-year-old Snip3down think the future was going to hold? Did you, in your wildest dreams, imagine what the next 20 or so years would look like as they did?
I definitely can't say that the 20 years or whatever, is going to be in the boat. But for me, when I just kept hearing about like MLG and gaming, I think my interest peaked because like I said, like once I broke my arm, I broken both my arms. So the second time I broke it was I was an eighth grader, and that was like peak Halo time. And I just really started putting as much as I can into it, hearing about these tournaments, people telling me that you can't be pro, like all the pros and my peers that I'm looking up to telling me that I'm an online kid, I'm not going to be good enough. And I was winning locals around Indiana at that point, and really starting to get my name on the map. And honestly, at that point, it was like, well, if I'm arguably the best in Indiana, all my friends are hyping me up, I became the best there pretty quick, then I feel like it's time to try and take those talents to other states to see who I could compete against. And the confidence was there. Like I said, my father, played college football, and competition in every single thing I do, no matter what. Board games, I'd have. I was a little like freak out kid. If I didn't win, I would freak out on my friends, or like I was a little rager back then. Not like that now. But I think that just drove me to always want to be the best. Like, and it's kind of taught through my family. It's just, if you're gonna commit to something, commit to be the greatest. Don't, half-ass it and put everything you can into it. And it just kind of evolved and evolved and evolved even more over the years.
That is such a fantastic answer, and I also agree with you wholeheartedly. I make people rage quit Monopoly because I play it so intensely. So you're speaking to my very soul. But when I do look at your Halo career, right? Start competing around 2008. Let's go. Seriously, I don't want to be disrespectful of the smaller local tournaments, but like on the pro level, Halo 3, Halo Reach, Halo 4, Halo Infinite, like all of these games, they tweak, they change slightly. You have won at least one tournament with 9 different teams. Like that's wild to me. When we look at all this, how do you continue to find success across different versions of games with different players by your side, yet for the better part of 20 years, you still come out on top? What's the secret sauce?
Yeah, I think actually it's always funny looking back and thinking about how many different variations of teams I've been on. I've always kind of felt like a nomad when it comes to finding rosters. I'll stick on a team, we'll have success, we'll be together for a year and a half tops, and then it'll kind of go all over the place. And especially that first year, I was on 4 different teams, my first 4 events, with 2 wins under my belt actually, which is kind of crazy, and then kind of slowed down and solidified. But honestly, it's one of those things where you want to surround yourself with people who are just as passionate as you are when it comes to work ethic and everything that you put into the game. And for me early on, it was really easy to do that. I was young, and so I was looking up to a lot of these people who were older than me, and they felt like older brothers at the time as well, and so they obviously were teaching me and mentoring me, and I'm very happy to have been surrounded by some very intelligent peers at that time to guide me in the right path. And for me, it was just always I told myself from the very beginning, like, I will compete and I will try to be the best until I no longer have that fire and passion to commit what it takes to be the best, because then I'd be doing a disservice to myself and all the people that have supported me through all these years.
I mean, it makes sense. And also your teammates, right? And people around you.
Exactly.
Ultimately, it is a team-based game. If you are not going to deliver, and also if you don't have that hunger to be the best, I see this a lot, especially like league-based tournaments. The 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th place teams, they just don't have that fire. So what, in your mind, separated, let's say, some of the good or great players that were side by side with you versus the ones that were championship winning players? You're in a pretty unique position where you have found success. Maybe you are the secret sauce. Maybe you were the X factor that picked up all of these wins. But what were some of the things in let's say Halo specifically that differentiated winning teammates from just good teammates?
I've said, it's so funny because I've always said this. I feel like there are people and players that have like a championship aura around them. Like, you can just kind of feel if people are going to take the situation into their own hands. Whether it's teammates, it's just a confidence thing. It's such a confidence thing, and just surrounding yourself with people who are just as confident, but not like a delusional confidence in a way. Just people that can hold you accountable. And I always credit, we'll get into this later, but like Hal, for example, when I played with him in Apex Legends, like him and I, we didn't let each other live it down if we had a bad moment. And those types of people that kind of push you to be better while also like kind of competing with your teammates in a sense, to want to be the best version of yourself for yourself, to show off, look good, and then to obviously just elevate everyone around you.
I mean, I really like that example, because I think to have that championship aura, you have to be competing with yourself. You have to constantly be self-reflecting, looking at a way to grow. And I like that idea as well, that you're competing with your teammate, but to be the best version of yourself, not necessarily to like shit on them in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you think about your Halo, this is a tough question. What's your gut reaction? What's one of the first memories that comes to mind when you think about a specific Halo tournament or moment that you think can kind of define Snip3down as a successful player?
Man, I'll never forget my first tournament win with Triggers Down. It was my 3rd event in MLG Orlando. And I'd just gotten dropped off my previous roster on Instinct. We got second. It was like a huge event. Everyone was hyping me up. I was a big talk around then at that point in time. And then I got dropped like 5 minutes before the roster deadline. I had to get thrown on a team that, I hadn't played with, nothing, had those 5 minutes. And we go to the event and we steamrolled everybody. We like 3-0'd every single team. We ended up losing the first series to Straight Rippin' and then 3-0ing them in the finals. And during that series, I remember it was a huge talk of me and Neighbor at the time, of just like who's like the rising star in the year, and Halo 3 had just came out. And I remember Puckett just casting over the clips, and it was kind of like grand finals, cameras on me, sniper, and I just start peeling faces. I'm sticking people across the map, and it was like I think Puckett's like he can't, like he's getting away with everything. Like I throw sticky and stick people, and it was just one of those where it's like, I have arrived type of feeling. And you watch the gameplay, and it was like I was just dominating. And then to go into my next event with a different team and win with that team, it was a first of its time. Was back-to-back wins on 2 separate teams, and it was like, holy cow! Like that, it's just a wild start to the career for sure.
Now, also, correct me if I'm wrong. Like, is that 2009 or was that 2008?
That was 2008. 2008.
2008. Okay, so again, this is the very beginning of the success. Over 20 majors, you've already got, like you said, third and fourth tournament, back-to-back wins. How is it that you were able to stay that successful when so many players would change and rotate? So what was specifically some of the things that you trained, that you practiced, that you worked on to find success for as long as you did?
I think it really all started off with Halo 2 free-for-alls, because that was before, I had a team. I was still making my name in there, and that was something I grinded for. Like, I would get home from school or get home from after, tennis practice or whatever it was, and I would just grind free-for-alls nonstop. And it got to the point where that helped my individual play so much, because I just learned how to take individual fights or position better or catch people off guard just solely based off of where I'm at on the map. And then that skill transferred into 4v4s when I started having people like mentor me a little bit. And the matchmaking system in Halo 2 was just phenomenal, because that allowed me to play against the top players and kind of see where I'm at before I started competing. It was like, oh, okay, like I can keep up. And then, started getting into the lobbies and challenging myself. And honestly, I think that's just always what it was. It was just challenging myself to be better, and using disappointment, whether it's like disappointment in a ranked game or a custom or whatever it is, and using that to fuel myself and be like, all right, where did I make mistakes? As well as being humble enough to know that there are other people that I can learn from. And I watched tons of gameplay of other pros at that time, and would just pick things up very quickly of what they did well and applying that to my own gameplay.
I wish it was a skill that was a little bit more widespread. The humbleness to look up to, either players that are playing a different play style, or maybe they're a little older or have more experience, but simultaneously being humble enough to also look at yourself and go, okay, what can I do better? How do I change? I think the comment you made about being a little bit of a rager and growing out of that, learning to communicate healthily, I think that's a journey so many of us have gone on, especially from the early 2000s and when you're playing online. And look, we want to focus on kind of the origins of elements of your career, elements of your job, because we could spend hours just talking about the Halo championships and the Halo wins. And I'm sure you've done a lot of interviews about those. So I do want to ask you, how did you feel when the chapter of Halo began to close and then you looked towards Apex? What was that story like?
Yeah, it was very bittersweet. I mean, coming to a close with Halo, starting with Halo 1 all the way up until Halo 5, and just kind of seeing the game slowly lose its, spark, and other games start to take over. It was like, it was a baby. It felt like it was like too big to fail. A lot of childhood into that with, the friends and the LANs and the get-togethers. And it was a lot of questions were raised at that point in time, and kind of what I was wanting to do, or where I was wanting to, take my career, or everything I've learned up to that point. And I was, honestly blessed with the Apex Legends coming out right around that time that, 343 decided to pull away from the Halo 5 tournaments. And one of my good friends, Ghost Ayami, was actually working at Respawn at that point in time, right when the game silent launched. No one knew it was coming out. And he was just, big Halo player, big Halo pro, like very, accomplished as well. And he came to me, he's like, dude, this game has the sauce. And like, he's like, I don't know what to tell you. Silent launch, no one knew. And he was like, this is going to be the game. And he's like, trust me, like they're interested in esports, just play it, see if you like it, get involved, and start trying to make your way into the communities, because this could be the next big thing for you if you really like it. So shout out to him. I've given him so much credit for that, because I don't know if I would have been playing the game as frequently as I did when it first came out.
Oh, that's amazing to hear. And just so, I can keep up and our viewers can as well, what sort of age are you now? And, what sort of time frame are we on? Because I've jumped many, many years from, 2008 tournaments.
So this Apex Legends, I think, launched around 2018, 2019. So I was 27, like 27, right when that game came out, and I started switching up what I was competing in. So I was playing Halo professionally from when I just turned 17, I want to say, right in my first event, up until 27. So that was about a full decade.
That's unbelievable. So Apex Legends dropped February 4th, 2019. I just Googled it.
Wow,
I didn't have that prepared myself. I won't lie. But
yeah, they just had their big 7-year anniversary. I should have known that.
Listen, like me too. I was watching it. I've watched a lot of Apex in the last couple of years. How different are the games? Obviously, we're going from 4v4 to Battle Royale and stuff. But talk me through, let's say, the aim, the movement, your individual role, and then the game as a whole, going from kind of team-based smaller maps to battle royales.
Yeah, I'd never really played battle royales up until that point. I played a little bit of PUBG on PC and never really, a little bit of Fortnite, never got into H1Z1, that kind of thing. So it was a completely new scenario, but the game just felt like a combination of Halo and Call of Duty to me at that point in time, with like the heals, the way the heal system worked. It felt like, repositioning in Halo, getting to your shields back, getting your health back. Call of Duty kind of style of gunplay and movement. And I think that was one of the biggest things, is like Apex just had this movement and repositioning ability. And it just reminded me so much of the skills that I had from Halo. And the transition was very quick. Not to mention, no one played controller at the beginning of Apex. And I was just still am avid controller player. So I think I kind of put controller on the map in that game a little bit after the first X Games event.
That is so cool to hear. To an untrained eye, I'm a Apex PC player, but I'm mouse and key. I've never really gone into controller. And as I mentioned, I never had the pleasure to kind of experience competitive Halo, especially not in the early days. It looks to me like Apex Legends is significantly quicker than Halo. Is that fair to say? And outside of the mobility sides, what was the hardest thing to learn and to adapt to?
I think the hardest thing to learn and adapt to is just knowing, Halo's a respawn game. So it's fast paced, but it's not as punishing as Apex Legends if you make a mistake. So making sure that you're just on the same page as your teammates, and, the baiting and switching, and just being very aware of your shields and not going down is just such an impactful thing. Whereas like in Halo, if you get a 2-4 trade, like in a Slayer, you go 2 down, they go 4 down. That's a huge win for positioning everything. In Apex, it's just, you're in or you're out. You're opening up the floor for the third parties. If someone goes down on your team, then it's just a lot more discipline per life than, a game like Halo, because, you don't get that luxury of responding.
Yeah, and I also think as well, the decision-making trees are very different, right? Smaller map, respawns, it's about positioning. Similar vibes like Call of Duty in that way. Whereas Apex, you got so much more space. Sometimes you have more time to think. By this point in your career, we're 10 or so years on, at least, from the beginning of the Halo 3 tournaments. You're older, you're wiser. I presume you've matured as a player. So when did you start to feel that you were the big brother? When did you start to feel that you were the mentor? That now you've won tournaments across all these Halo titles. You've won tournaments in Apex. Like, you're the unk, So yeah. When did you realize that, and how did it impact both teams and play?
I think for me, the big switch up with Apex honestly came at the very first X Games again. I had 2 teammates in Mimu and Zero Nothing. I want to say they were from Finland, and they had never competed on the stage, and no one really there had competed at any tournaments at all. And I'm talking to a lot of the pro players at this X Games Minneapolis, and I was like, I have more tournament experience than every single person on this stage combined. It's time to use that to my advantage and, understand kind of the psychological factors that go into competing on a stage like this in front of people and what goes into that. And my teammates were pretty nervous at time. And I was like, I'm just going to start gassing them up, hyping them up. If they start to feel down, really just take over and use what Ed's taught me, because it's just such a big factor is that mental factor at tournaments and that confidence and knowing that your teammates have confidence in you. Because a lot of times, you'll see teams underperforming or whatever, you look over and teammates are sighing at each other or not talking to each other. And it's like, that was a big thing for me. And I was like, okay, like I need to take advantage of the fact that I have all that experience and bring that to all the teams I join, especially early on in Apex before people get, the ability to catch up like that.
Do you have a powerful memory about when maybe you learned that lesson as a player? I know a lot of pros do, especially ones that are as fiery as maybe I imagine the early days were. But like, when did you go from being the star player that maybe was a bit lippy to then realizing, oh no, actually there's more value in controlling and thinking about it?
I'd say that honestly came down to, man, it had to have been the roster with Hal. Like, because that was just one of those where, he's the young gun with the fiery attitude. And that was probably about a year into Apex at that point. And, as an IGL, I had to respect him as an IGL because I didn't play Battle Royale. So I need someone to kind of guide me as well. And he had a lot of history there. And so I had to, show a lot of respect to him with a big age gap. I think he was like 18 at the time. And I was, I'm 10 years older essentially. And, there's a, you don't as the elder player, it's like it's a weird dynamic, like being so much older and having someone so much younger kind of guide you and tell you everything you do, and then being able to kind of manage when we get into disagreements and, like I said, like kind of challenge each other in a way that's not disrespectful, even though there were moments that like got a little too heated or over the top, but just knowing it's a moment of passion and being the one to kind of not escalate past a certain level. If things get too hot, just kind of walk away, come back to it. And I think learning over the years, just from all the different teams and personalities I've been on, is that every team that you're on is a relationship of its own. And you could compare those to real life relationships. It's like, if you're not open about how you're feeling or honest of what you're sensing in game or with your teammates, you feel like something's wrong, there's probably something wrong. And taking, the initiative to acknowledge that and have an open conversation about it is the best path towards a resolution and success, rather than building up resentment along the lines or talking to your friends or other peers about how your teammates are underperforming. And then that gets back to them and it just creates this really unhealthy dynamic. I think obviously the most important thing is what's happening within the team versus outside. And I think that's still a huge problem today with a lot of these teams and why we see so many teams break up so fast.
If you're not coaching a team in the next 12 months, then I don't know what the hell. Dude, you are so inspirational to listen to. It's fantastic. I've never actually heard the eloquence that you've described of being a 28-year-old player, being guided by an 18-year-old player who's IGL. As somebody, I'm nearly 40, and I'm in a similar boat where the games that I'm playing, you have to look with respect to the younger kids, but you also have years of wisdom and experience that you can offer in exchange for maybe some of the gameplay stuff. Here's a slightly interesting question for you. Because you are very self-reflective and very earnest, when you think about all of the skills that you developed from 8-year-old winning GoldenEye to now 28-year-old winning Apex, right? What was the timeline of skills? Because the first, let's say 5 years, I imagine you're just good. Controllers on fire. When do you start to learn leadership? When do you start to learn communication? When do you start to be more strategic and less, just popping heads?
Yeah, that transition, man, was actually a tough one because I had such an overnight success story in early Halo 3. And at the beginning of any new game, I learned this along the years. At the beginning of any new game, it's all skill. Like, it's not teamwork. It's not anything because the people don't know the game, the maps as well. It's just all individual skill. And that carried me through my first, couple years. And I want to say, at the end of Halo 3, I didn't end anywhere near where I felt I was capable of or where I was at. And I think a lot of that had to do with, my young ego at that age of not like learning how to be the best team player and just thinking I could just win everything with my individual skills. And honestly, that transition into Halo Reach was tough because, overnight success into kind of like not falling off. I was still placing top 6, top 8, like at all these events, but not still being like the star, and people being like, is he as good of a team player as he is an individual player, and kind of rebuilding and kind of having to, because like I said, like I was a rager, I was cocky, like I talked trash, like I might have burned some bridges for all I know back then. And I think getting back onto a team eventually and having to work my way back up, especially into Halo Reach, Halo 2 Anniversary, and getting the privilege to play with Roy, Lunchbox, Pistola, and creating our own dynasties, and just seeing how those teams functioned, it really put into perspective of, oh, this is why these guys were winning consistently again, and then adopting that and taking that forward for there and forever.
Do you think there's an argument to be made that the timeline of when you learn those skills is appropriate? Because the debate that I have in my head is, sometimes when you're that skilled, when you have the raw talent that you clearly did in these titles, I think you can delay some of the more communication team-based stuff, because there's a world in which if you have all those skills, maybe your individual skill doesn't, line up. How does that sound to your ears?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one or the other. Like, you either come in and you're a very good team player right away, and like you've gained that skills because you've worked with the people that get you to that point, or like you have the individual talent that needs to be honed in one way or the other, because it's such an interesting mix. And then for myself over the years, being the individual play style and realizing that, I need to turn that into a less selfish play style at times and be more of a team player and sacrifice my own life at times for the betterment of the team. It's
a skill. It's a skill to learn.
It is. It's just such a weird transition to look back and just like see what I used to play like, because I'll do that every now and then. Just be like, let's just see, what this is like, and I would just dive forward, challenge everything, and it's like, okay, maybe that wasn't always the best play, but man, like that delusional confidence and just thinking you're the best or thinking you can get away with anything, it really shows in games sometimes.
I really, really like the way you explained it. Championship aura. And I mentioned Call of Duty a second ago, but at Esports World Cup, the Falcons Warzone team, but they're playing Rebirth Island. The trio there have that energy that you described. It's cockiness, it's ego, but it's grounded in reality. It comes from a place that, like, hey, they have this energy because they can pull it off. And I really, really like the fact that you talked about the kind of pressure and the self-reflection. How did you, as a person, how did Eric approach the pressures differently from the end of Halo to Apex? The industry has changed, your success has changed. There's expectations on you from different games. So how did you handle that pressure?
Yeah, it's actually so strange looking back, because I feel like I didn't really, like, I was young. I didn't really feel the pressure. It was so weird. Like, everyone always talks about being on the stage and feeling the pressure. I didn't really feel that pressure at a young age. I feel like I started feeling it a little as I started getting older, like especially into the tail end of the career, because people start questioning you a lot more. You're early on and you're showcasing like how good you are, how talented you are, and everyone's hyping you up nonstop, and it's mostly positive with such success. And then you go through turmoil, and then you start having to deal with the social pressure and people taking your age into account and discrediting you for things like that right away. And it's like, oh man, like I have almost more to prove near the tail end of my career to try and stay relevant with a bunch of kids, because as I get older, my competition stays just as young. Like that doesn't change. They're not getting older with me. The life of a pro gamer is only usually a couple of years, and so for me, I think that really started thinking to myself, like, dang, I need to go out here and prove myself even twice as much now, just so people don't discredit me. Like, even having success at tournaments, people are like, oh, like he's getting
wasn't as good as it was
around. It wasn't him. That was the reason for the success. Like it was early on. It was like, oh, Snip3down carried these teams. Now it's like, oh, Snip3down, needs to pull more of his weight, even though they just placed very well. So the switch up there was very different. But I think I always talk about just if you're prepared and you feel like you put in the work and everything necessary, then that's all you need to know and tell yourself going into it to try and have your best showing.
I mean, it's a very healthy mindset, and also you're a victim of your own success. Like when the benchmark is set so high and then you're able to maintain that for a long time, you're always in a honeymoon period. And like, just to be frank, I love the phrase nomad. You're always in a honeymoon period with nomads, different teams, winning tournament after tournament. So when things slow down, you feel it a little bit more. What did balancing those feelings and prep and social media look like? You know, with a career as long as yours, with as many games as you played, and seeing the evolution of the industry, the titles you're playing, the esports scene, like, how do you balance all of those things, or how did you when you look back?
Yeah, I think it's a lot harder now than it ever was to try and balance just social media because it's so prominent versus when I first started competing in 2008. You know, it really wasn't. Like, YouTube wasn't even really as big, and you know, we didn't have these big social platforms to show off your skills and talents. It was all word of mouth back then. And I think, you know, I respect the heck out of all these gamers today that have to deal with, you know, hundreds of thousands of people that are watching their every move, their every sentence, and having an opinion that they form off of it, because it's hard to ignore a lot of the time. And it's funny looking back and seeing how many people have been affected by the change up of no social presence online, where no one is hyper analyzing their gameplay or things that are happening with their team, versus now, you know, if you make one mistake or you're on a big organization like Optic, for example, and, you know, you don't have a good event, you're getting torched, and trying to recover from that mentally, it's hard not to pay attention to it. So I think the environment around social media has changed drastically from when I first started to now. And you know, it is a lot of pressure.
Did you ever feel it? Because you mentioned now that, like, yes, I agree. The early 2000s, early 2010s, the industry was not as big. There weren't as many viewers. There weren't as many sponsors. Like, it's like different things. But did that ever impact you? Is it something that you look back on and go, not really?
Yeah, I don't think for me that the social media stuff had a huge impact. I think for anything, it kind of just validated me early on, because, you know, early on with that, with MLG forums, like, it was just, I was the new guy looking for comments and people hyping me up and like, oh my gosh, she's like the next big thing. And it was a lot of fun. And then, you know, later on, I don't think it ended up affecting me too much. I think the only thing that really started to get to me was how my peers in my competition started to talk about me, and then that gets reflected into the community after the fact. Is just, you know, a lot of things going on, and then you just, as you, like I said, as you get older, like, it doesn't matter how you're performing, especially when a lot of people, like, I know this over the time, is like how much you can bring to the table with your mentality. And at live events, it's a lot more than just individual skill and flashiness. But a lot of these people that are new, that haven't competed, only see gun skill. They only see, you know, how many kills you put up at the end of the game. There's nothing else that goes into it. And the intangibles are what you can't show on a stats page. And I think a lot of that gets discredited. As I started moving on, it's very much so.
It's misunderstood because as somebody that used to compete and then I aged down, I was in a place I couldn't do it. I understand at a very, very low level those intangibles because I did it. And I won tournaments. It was locals. I got to compete in international tournaments in Call of Duty 4. So I've experienced like the skill gap, being a South African Call of Duty player that got the shit kicked out of me when I went to my first European land. Like, the level was so different. The reason I use that example is that I think it is very true that a lot of people who haven't won tournaments, haven't been in the spotlight, they haven't felt that pressure, you can't explain it. It's not something you can teach, and it's something that can be heavy. Did you ever feel that there was times when you needed to take a break, either from competing, from team, from social, you know, because it was a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the tail end, I mean, that's really where it all started to, I kind of took a break and I was like, is this worth the mental strain anymore of trying to, you know, gain approval from, you know, so I got now social media and my peers all, you know, saying certain things, and then the time commitment that goes into it. And then if you underperform with the time commitment, it's like, okay, you know, I'm not 17 anymore with the luxury of having all this time to make something of it. I turned 34 this year, and it's like, you know, I can't commit to, you know, getting top 3 as the only form of, you know, making this a viable career, just because of, you know, all the time and things you had to put in, because the disappointment that comes with, you know, preparing to that level and feeling like you go unprepared and then not making it is really hard to put into words. And for me, it's like, you know, it's time to take everything, take that competition and find something else to put all that energy into that I've done.
That is awesome. I'm looking forward to hearing like what Eric today is doing, what Eric tomorrow is going to do. Before we get to modern day, I'd love for you to maybe paint a picture, especially for European non-Halo players. What was Halo 1 like? And
Oh
how did the
man.
scene evolve? How does, with each iteration, with the growth of MLG, with, the championship series, like, give me as concise a summary of what that development of the scene was like from your perspective.
Yeah, man, I'll never forget like Halo getting launched around that Halo 1 time. It was the cool kids game at school. Like there was no other game, we don't have the Steam inventories that we have today. It was like that was the game. And the entire after parties at school, like 2 times a week, we'd have buses of people getting on to go to my buddy's house, 16 people there, and then another friend would host 16 people, wires everywhere. And it was just such an in-person experience that just it felt like tournaments in your own home or someone else's home with these like LAN parties that would just become big. And it just, that alone was inclusive enough and felt like a community of people that loved gaming, and we all shared that passion. And that was then expanded into the local tournaments, and it becoming bigger and bigger. And it's like, oh my gosh, like then you're competing for best of the state and best in the country, whatever it is.
Also, before we get to that, what sort of size, right? So obviously you're playing at home, 16 odd people. You start playing locals in your town at a mall, we're going what, 50 to 100 people. When you go to best in state, where are we playing? Are we playing in like a high school gym? When do you start hitting arenas and stadiums?
So when it came to like the locals and stuff, I mean, yeah, you wouldn't have like the big gymnasium. It just wasn't big enough back then yet. It just wasn't. But it would just be like these big local LAN centers. I remember Talk City in Greenwood, Indiana. That was like, I developed a gamer tag around then, like ITOXI, which is such a throwback. But it was like, probably 100 people, and probably 100 to 200 people just all sitting there watching, surrounding each other's games. And it felt like its own stadium. And for me, coming from that competitive background of sports and everything, it was like, oh my gosh, like this is like, I feel like I'm on that stage and people are watching me just like I'm watching the athletes play football on the big screen. That's what it felt like.
What's your fondest memory of an in-person tournament? When you look up from your controller and you see a crowd, or you lifting a trophy, what's one of? Let's go one of. You have so many, so we'll go one of your fondest.
Well, one of my fondest for sure is like I said, that Orlando event, because just the big bleacher stadium setting, and I had people like right next to me on some bleacher seats. Just, it was the first time I'd ever heard my name like chanted in a crowd as well, and I just had people like reaching over or like peeking over and just like hyping me up, and I'd get a big triple kill, and I'd hear the person right to my left just screaming in my ear at this massive tournament as the crowd blows up. I'd say that's a big one, but I think the real biggest one had to have been the X Games, the Halo X Games in Aspen, Colorado, just because you could write a movie about that tournament, everything leading up to that tournament, the team drama, who we were competing against. Like, it was just like, it really felt like a movie, and having some of my best friends there travel all the way out to that tournament to compete in, and then getting snowed in. We got trapped in for like 4 days after that, and just basking in that success of what we just accomplished as a team was one of those kind of surreal moments that you'll never forget ever.
I really like seeing your smile when you're telling those stories. Like, you can really feel the emotion and looking back. I think it's fair to say that when documentaries look back at the development of esports, when they look at historical champions across different games, your name is going to be in the record books, right? This is just a fact, just based on the success that you've had, the fact that your nickname happens to be pioneered with the fact that you're arguably the best sniper that Halo's ever seen, which is just a beautiful succinctness.
Love that.
How would you like, or how do you wish the documentaries will look back and talk about your time as a competitive player? What is the legacy you hope to leave behind?
I think honestly, the legacy that I hope to leave behind is just kind of commitment to my craft. I had overnight success, and that's like very rare, but that also just kind of goes to show a lot of people that, you don't, it's not all just connections. It's about what you can show to everyone else, and getting into the space is just about how you can present your own gameplay for everyone to then see and then, rally behind. And for me, I think it's dedication. And like I said, like, the fact that I've been able to compete in, I competed in Call of Duty too for a little bit, Call of Duty Ghosts. And I was really interested in that game, and just having the love and the dedication to always try and become a better version of yourself than you were the previous day, especially when it comes to gameplay, because working around and how to play with multiple different teams and players, it really, you can't always play the same way, and learning how to adapt. So I'd say I was very adaptable, and just, I feel like any team I've been on, I've always been the most passionate or tied with the most passionate of having that success, because I'm not competing to be mediocre. I'm competing to be the best. And I always wanted to go down as one of the greatest FPS gamers of all time. And I hope I can end somewhere in that conversation.
Hey, listen, I think there are very, very few players that I can think of, genre-defining players that have the resume that you do. There's no doubt about it, right? I mean, this is just a statistical fact. And I always love the idea of trying to compare, right? Let's take the greatest Call of Duty players. Let's put them up against the greatest Halo players. Let's put them side by side the greatest Counter-Strike players and debate whose legacy was greater. It's one of my fun, it's one of the things I talk about at bars with friends, but this is not the place for that.
Well, it's funny. I compare across games and genres too sometimes, and I always think Call of Duty wise, because Call of Duty, took off after Halo, and it became like the game. So it kind of felt like I was watching this weird transition where Halo kind of dogged on Call of Duty and Gears of War, and then COD became the big game. Yeah. And a player that I've always kind of thought my career was relatively similar to is Clayster. I've said that a bunch of times, just because Clayster always was. I called him a nomad too. I mean, he's on countless teams, always kind of his own player. Kind of get ups and downs. He'd be winning a championship and they get beat down, thrown on a team that he was. I didn't think he would ever, was supposed to be on, and bring that team to the finals and and win another championship. And it was like, I think being able to take the punches, and turn that into something more, just because you care, and not letting those moments of mediocrity kind of define you, and taking it into your own hands, and still knowing that you have what it takes to be a champion.
That's where drive, motivation, passion, they all fuel it, right? Like, you have to be able to deal with that. I love the comparison, and I really, really love looking at different names and seeing, okay, who would line up. One of the things that I will just mention again is that we could spend hours and hours and hours talking about tournament wins, your teammates, your players. That's not really the point. So I'm hoping that I've given you some interview questions that you don't normally have. But I would love to know, what is Snip3down doing now? I know you've done some commentary work. I know you're currently streaming, but who is the Snip3down of 2026? And what does the next 12 to 24 months look like for you?
Yeah, that's definitely a question. I don't get very often, because it was always just about competing. But my wife and I just moved out to California. So we're here for 4 months while she's finishing up some college, and we're going to be starting a business together. So it's going to be, around the gaming space, still always, dedicated to the gaming space and being involved in this scene, and kind of trying to take what I've learned in college. I went to college for marketing and entrepreneurship at Ball State University. And after everything I've, learned, the connections, and just how in love I am with the space, I think the goal is to, remain obviously very involved doing broadcast work, whether it's with Apex or Halo, and remain close knit to the spaces and scenes itself. I love, working with game companies and trying to provide input on, how things that could be improved, or if just kind of not game testing, but information, just kind of, giving information on where I could see that go, and just kind of just really seeing where this industry can take us. And I love it. I don't really think, streaming and content creation is great, but I never really got into this to be a streamer or a content creator. I got into this to be a professional and try and be the best that I could. So I don't get that competitive itch, or that itch to be like the best content creator or best streamer. So I figure, starting a business, and trying to be dedicated to, taking that as far as it can, and providing something for people that they can use, and competing with myself now to see how far, we can take this company.
I wish you the best of luck. I presume you're not ready yet to do any announcements or shout outs. You're welcome to plug it now if you want.
No, I wish.
Okay, cool.
I wish.
Good.
Yeah, that's kind of what this 4 months we're here for, is just to kind of solidify everything. And
I almost got a scoop. I almost got a scoop for esports.
Yeah, almost.
Can I ask?
I'll make sure you do.
That, I mean, listen, the guys here at the team would absolutely love to help, share it and promote it and talk about it.
Thank you.
Maybe we can do another episode on the origin of whatever your venture is.
Yeah.
But let's do another question. How has your relationship with competition changed now that you've kind of transitioned to this next phase of your career and life?
Yeah, my relationship with competition is changed in the sense of, when it comes to video games, I'm trying to actually enjoy video games for the first time. I feel like in a really long time, in a sense of not hopping on and instantly playing the ranked ladder and needing to climb, and just kind of like casually enjoying games. And I think at this point, I can look back at my gaming career and be very proud of what I've accomplished, and not feel like, there's still something I need to leave on the table. And now it's just individual accomplishments for, the relationship with just, my wife and the business and everything going forward, and just kind of making the best and providing like the happiest lifestyle for us going forward. Because I feel like while I was competing, it is hard to maintain outside relationships because you're so dedicated and so focused, and your mood is so impacted by, how you're doing. And, I think that was a huge lesson, and that took a really long time to change up. Yeah.
That's a really, really, really good answer. And I really like how you phrased it, because I think, again, it's very telling of just frankly, how committed you are to finding success as a competitive player, as a teammate, whatever it is that you're competing in, whether it's with yourself or anything, it's hugely important. Let's do one last question looking forward before I start to wrap up for this episode. We always wrap up with some quick fire questions. Before we get to that, what do you hope for when you think about the future of Halo or Apex Legends?
I wish nothing but the best for both these titles. I think Halo, has been through a lot, and I really would just love to see them have one killer game before the, whatever happens. But, it's been beat down for a while. I think the community sentiment is pretty rough around the game. And, if a game comes out that I can casually love, I'd love to end my gaming career, and maybe not competing in Halo, but just like playing Halo casually. And, if a battle royale comes out or whatever it might be, I would, I wish nothing but the best for that franchise. And, Apex is in such a, I have so many just wonderful things to say about that game, and the opportunities that's presented me after, Halo kind of phased out a little bit, and being able to travel the world and, head to Japan, and they got tournaments in, Germany and Switzerland. And it's just those opportunities that you just would have never, my 15-year-old self going to locals in Indianapolis at the top of them all is just, eyes wide open of what this kind of presents to you in the world of opportunity, and just appreciating that, and, embracing it as long as I can. I absolutely love the broadcast work that I'm able to do. And I still get that competitive itch, kind of back to the last question of where does competition, like, where do I see it? I get more nervous watching, and my heart pounds harder watching these games come down to the wire than whenever I was competing in them, because you're so locked. And it's just, it's fun to be a spectator and still have the passion to talk about the games that I'm able to get.
And you're very eloquent at doing so. This has been one of my favorite conversations. I really, really, really believe that this is a fair statement, that your success is not only phenomenal, it should be celebrated. And how you reflect on that journey, there is a hunger there that is a little bit egotistical, but in a way, it's with humility. It is about the drive. So I just want to say congratulations one more time. I learned a lot about Halo, researching for this and getting ready for our interview. And I do want to say, for our quick fire questions now, try to give me just your gut reaction. You're welcome to expand. Give me a sense if you want to, but I'll try to keep the tempo up. All right. Okay. So let's start with your favorite Halo map of all time.
Midship.
Your favorite version of Halo of all time?
Halo 2.
The worst weapon in Apex Legends?
Oh my gosh. Well, it was the P20s, so I mean, it's not anymore. But it's oh my gosh. Go ahead.
This is fact.
Yep,
I'm just going black or white. Okay, I just want to clip these out and get rage bait on socials. Your favorite Apex Legends legend?
Valkyrie.
The toughest Halo player you ever played against?
Personally, it was World 2 for me.
The toughest Halo team you ever played against?
Toughest Halo team. Instinct God Squad.
The single team that you would define as the best team that you've ever played on in your entire career?
It was my Halo 2 anniversary roster with Roy, Lunchbox, and Lethal. We were pretty unstoppable.
One tournament that you wish you could relive next month?
X Games. It's got the X Games Halo event in Aspen, Colorado. I dream about that one still.
I love that so much. Eric, thank you so much. Snip3down, congratulations again. Can we just do one last thing? Tell us where we can find you. What are your channels? What are your social handles? And, where can people look at your next projects?
Yeah, if you're looking to stay up to date with, what's going on, you can find me at x.com/Snip3down. Same thing for Twitch and YouTube. YouTube is EDW Snip3down, but trying to be a little more active on those, but appreciate y'all for taking the time to support.
And of course, for anybody who's a little bit older, that's a 3 in the snipe, right? Make sure the number's in there.
Yes.
That's right, isn't it? Yeah. I used to be 1K myself, so I just want to make sure we got that. Snip3down with a 3.
Eric, I used to hear about that enough.
Thank you so much. Listen, best of luck on all the planning. I'm really looking forward to hearing what the next project's going to be from California, and we will be speaking again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. Snip3down. I mean, the best sniper that Halo has ever seen. One of the most successful console FPS players. One of the most successful FPS players, period, on the planet. I wish you all the luck in your future ventures. That does it for this episode of the Esports Awards Origins podcast. I have had such a blast talking to yet another incredibly successful player. We'll see you on the next one. There's an entire playlist. Go check out some of the others that we've done. And until then, goodbye.